best to focus this week. Very, very important week of lecture content. Now today is definitely the shortest, the shortest of the four parts by far, but yet none the least one of the more important ones. And the reason I say that is because probably about 2 years ago or so, one of my former students emailed me and said, "Hey, Rogers, will you send me that PowerPoint that you used for the circulation path?" Yeah, sure. Why? She said, well, she was in a nursing program, and so we're testing on it, and that's real important. I'm like, oh, cool. Then yeah, sure, I'll send it to you. So, and I'll explain why, a little bit more why it's important when we get to the end of it. But anyway, like I said, I really challenge you to focus, maintain your focus this week, and then after Thursday's lecture, then you can, relax. But not yet. Don't relax quite yet. A couple pieces of housekeeping business. Here are the numbers from the test. 78% average. That's not too bad. I'm okay with that. I prefer to see it 80 or higher, but nonetheless, I'm not going to bust your chops for a 78% average. And if, 3/4 of you passed, that's not bad either. I like that. Obviously, I want everybody to pass, but to be quite honest with you, I don't know if that's ever happened. If everybody if there's ever been a test that actually everybody passed it. I know I've had classes at the end where everybody passed, but not an individual test. So anyway, not bad. I'm not quite ready to do progress reports with you guys, and so, but over break I'll make sure I have all of my grading current, so that way when we come back from spring break that week in lab, I will be able to give you guys progress reports. So it's at that point, because I think the drop date is April 12th, if I'm not mistaken. And so after break, that first week of April will be basically when I pull each of you up to the desk, one at a time, show you your grade, say basically this is where you're at, a little past the halfway point, and this is where I project that you'll end up based on the numbers, okay? And it's strictly based on the numbers, not what I necessarily think of your ability, but just based on the numbers entirely. So don't take anything personally at that point. It's at that juncture where I would encourage you guys to ask me absolutely anything you want to ask. Any question is fair game. Rogers, am I going to pass? I'll tell you. Again, I'll give you my best guess. Rogers, should I drop? I will tell you if I think you should drop. Roger, should I, continue to try and be a nurse? I'll tell you if I think you're going to make it. Unfortunately, I've had to tell people that I think they won't make it. Why that, you might ask, Roger, that's kind of mean. Well, yeah, it is. But I have several colleagues, obviously, that are nursing instructors, and I asked them, should I pull my students aside and just be honest with them and tell them my opinion based on the numbers. And every single one of them said yes, absolutely. We don't want people getting to us that are not ready, because it's hard enough to get there, and once you get there, it's harder than you would expect. So I will tell you if I think you're going to make it into a nursing program or not. And if I don't think so, then honestly, believe it or not, guys, I actually do care. And so that's the day I get to take the teacher hat off and put the mentor hat on and say, all right, let's figure things out, because like I said, I want you to be successful and happy, and that might not be in nursing, but we can that's the stuff we can talk about. So anyway, think about what you want to ask before you come into that lab, and we'll chat. Like I said, anything is fair game. Anything you want to ask. Okay, any questions on the test? Because once we go on, we put it behind us and never speak of it again until the progress reports, then you can ask, like I said, whatever you want. Okay, now, into the big three. Now, I don't use PowerPoints for this first one. I put one together for you guys.
He's gonna draw.
But got my markers.
Yeah.
And we're gonna go old school and dirty up the wall. I was gonna say board, but it's not really much of a board. Okay. So you guys get to have your notes and we'll fill in the blanks here. So we're starting off talking about the circulatory pathway that I like to call it. Why talk about this? Any guesses as to why we're going to put this sequence on the board? Or
tie in with other things that we're going to learn?
It's going to tie in with other things, okay? And even a little bit more fine-tuned there, we're going to be able to say at the end that we can tie this in to a lot of practical health examples that you guys may have seen already, or what you more than likely will see as you go on, assuming that you stay in healthcare. Okay? So, you've got your notes and handouts. So basically the sequence that we're going to put up on the board, okay, is going to be a combination of vessels, valves, and chambers. Okay, those three things. Vessels, valves, and chambers. Now, before we put those up there, we wanted to find the difference between the systemic circuit and the pulmonary circuit, or systemic circulation versus pulmonary circulation. Now, this is a very deep, philosophically mind-blowing question. Okay, so brace yourselves for the impact. How many sides of the heart are there?
Two sides.
Two, right? What would they be? A right
and the left.
and a left. Okay, there you go. There's your minds are sufficiently blown. So, if there is a right side, and that would obviously mean that there's a left side, how many pumps would there be in the heart itself?
One,
That's more of a trick question.
I would say 4.
Two.
Two.
In and out.
Your heart is a double-sided pump. Okay, so your heart has essentially two pumps. It's a double-sided pump. Now, how many of you, assuming that you grew up in this area, how many of you grew up, let's say maybe on a farm or a ranch where irrigation was pretty important? Okay, I know I did. As a kid, one of my fond memories was, especially in the summertime, my brother and I, and at that time, and nobody gave a crap if you wore seatbelts. So my brother and I hop in my dad's truck with him, and we'll go out at night and shut the pumps off. You know, he'd say, okay, we're going to go over to Elkhorn and whatever. So if you know this area, you might know where that's at.
Work down there.
And I want to do this one. I want to do this one. So I get out and I go over and I hit that little red button and shut the pump off. Okay. Now, if you know what a pump is, okay, why is it important?
It moves
for that example.
To move water from one part to another?
To move water from one part to another. To move water from below ground, above ground, to then go out and irrigate the crops. Now, what's going to happen to, it was my grandfather's, what's going to happen to my grandfather's alfalfa or the almond orchard if those pumps break down and can't get water out to the crops? They're going to die, right? So, what you guys want to now reorient your way of thinking is look at your heart as a pump, okay? And your blood vessels as the pipes that carry the fluid that the heart pumps out. And if your pump goes down, you're screwed. Okay? Now, on occasion, hopefully, you would be in a position where you wouldn't be screwed. Where if your pump might go down temporarily, hopefully medical personnel can actually get it working again. But even if you were to be in a hospital and something happened to your heart, it's not a guarantee that they're going to be able to fix it, unfortunately. So, again, begin to think of your heart as a pump, and a pump that doesn't stop. Okay? Pumps that pump water, yeah, we can turn them on and off, but your heart doesn't stop. It keeps going. So, double-sided pump. Basically, we've got two areas of circulation, and the right side of the heart will govern one of those, and then, again, it's logical that the left side of the heart would govern the other part. So, let's first define systemic circulation. What's the key in that word?
System.
System. Okay? So when we think system, what are we thinking?
The rest of your body.
Your body. Your entire system. From here down to the bottom of your feet. Okay? Top to bottom. Systemic circulation. Specifically, what we're going to put up on the board today is, well, let me ask you this. Which of the, it's a double-sided pump, okay? Now, how many chambers does the heart have?
4.
4, okay? Now, if there's 2 pumps, okay, and 4 chambers, okay, how many of those chambers really are going to be the driving force behind each of the pumps? Just 2 of them, right? Okay? So, systemic circulation is the circulation between the left side of the heart, out to the body, back to the right side of the heart. Okay? Knowing that, which of the 4 chambers is going to be the driving force behind systemic circulation? It's going to be one of the 2 ventricles. Because the atria, yes, they contract, but they don't really send their blood anywhere other than the ventricles. Okay, so your ventricles are your driving forces behind those. So which of the 2 ventricles is the driving force behind systemic circulation?
The left ventricle.
The left ventricle. Why?
Because it's pumping out towards the rest of the body.
Well, yes, it is pumping out to the rest of the body. But let's get anatomical for a second. And those of you that have had anatomy, you probably were able to dissect something, whether it was a cat or maybe even something bigger, cut the heart open, and if you held the heart in your hand, which of the 2 ventricles was thicker? The left one. Okay? Based on that fact alone, that's why it is the driving force behind systemic circulation. Now, each of the 2 ventricles pumps the same volume of blood, but they differ in the amount of force that they create when they contract. Because, again, the left ventricle pumps blood everywhere. Everywhere. Now, obviously, what's going to be the driving force behind pulmonary circulation? The right ventricle. So, obviously you guys are taking notes, so let's define it. So systemic circulation, again, is what? Circulation between
the left side of the heart.
The left side of the heart,
The right side.
out to the body, back to the right side. Pulmonary circulation is the circulation between
The right
side of the heart
to the
to the lungs, back to the left side. Now, where is your heart, roughly? Chest, just slightly left of center. Where are your lungs? On both sides of it. So when the right ventricle contracts, it doesn't have to send blood out very far. So that's why it doesn't have to pump with a large amount of pressure versus the left ventricle. Okay? So, again, driving force behind systemic circulation is what? Left ventricle, driving force for pulmonary, right ventricle. Okay, make sure you've got those 2 things down and you're clear. Now, in your textbook, now this is, I mean, one of the things that really frustrates me is that And why we do this, honestly, I have no idea. But we use a different textbook in this class compared to if I were to go out to Kalinga and do the exact same class. 2 different textbooks. Same author, but they're different. It's kind of stupid. Now, with different textbooks, sometimes textbooks aren't necessarily standardized, meaning that what terminology one author might use is different than what another author might use. But one thing that is typically the same across the board
Go back to the left and then back to
is this, red and blue. Okay? Now, we're going to use red and blue and black because I couldn't find my green. Normally I use green. Okay? Black, we're going to use to signify vowels. Okay? So, let's create a score sheet for ourselves. How many vowels are there in the heart?
4.
4. 2 general types, right? You anatomy peeps. What are they? Go broader. You're going too specific. You're right, but I'm challenging you this morning. I know it's early.
Inside, outside?
The vowels. The vowels.
The left valve or the right valve?
A little bit too broad.
Oh,
Too broad. Okay? We've got the 2 valves that separate the atria from the ventricles, and we call those AV valves. And what does AV stand for?
Atrioventricular.
Atrioventricular. Real deep, right? Separates the atria from the ventricles. So there's AV valves. How many AV valves are there? 2, right? Because there's a right side and there's a left side.
Tricuspid.
So that would mean that there is a right AV valve and a left AV valve. Now, why they did this, I don't know, but going back, scientists, they just like to confuse us. So you've got these 2 valves that can go by different names, right? So you guys definitely want to get used to use this. You're going to use that when you start charting in medical charts.
Right side.
R,
left side.
circle that. L, circle that. What does that mean?
Right and left.
Right and left. Okay? So we've got a right AV valve and a left AV valve. Now, again, they like to confuse us, and these can go by different names. For now, we'll use the 2 most common ones. The right AV valve is also known as what?
Tricuspid.
Which would make this one?
The bicuspid.
And this guy also goes by
Mitral.
mitral. Okay? So there's 2 of the 4. So we're going to make our list over here, and then we'll plug them in the sequence. What are my other 2? Semilunar valves. Why do we call them semilunar valves?
The way they're shaped.
Yeah. Shaped like a half moon. So, what are their names?
Pulmonic valve. Or the aortic valve.
The aortic semilunar and
Pulmonic semilunar.
okay. Now, if you don't want to write SL, okay, believe it or not, we can call them different things. The aortic semilunar valve we can simply call the aortic valve. Our buddy here, we can just call him, somebody already mentioned it, pulmonic valve. So those are our 4. And those are our 4 valves. Now, one of the things that you guys, I'm not going to say maybe. There's no maybe about this. You have to know this. Okay? Otherwise, you will fail the test. You have to know this. What 2 chambers, or with these 2 guys, what 2 areas do they separate? Okay, you have to know that. So, Our right AV valve, the tricuspid valve, separates the what? Think of your anatomy. Right atrium from the right ventricle. Bicuspid valve separates the left atrium from the
Left ventricle.
left ventricle. Okay? Aortic semilunar valve separates the
The left
left
ventricle,
ventricle from the
aorta.
aorta. Pulmonic valve,
Right
right
ventricle,
ventricle from the
pulmonary artery.
pulmonary trunk.
Trunk.
Okay? You can't say pulmonary arteries
Because it's
because
not there
that's not
yet.
correct. Because right out of the right ventricle is the pulmonary trunk, and then it splits into the right and left pulmonary arteries. Okay, so we've got to be very, very specific here.
Right
Okay?
AV valve.
One more time, then you're on your own. Okay? Right AV valve separates the right atrium from right ventricle. Left AV separates left atrium from left ventricle. Aortic valve, left ventricle from aorta. Pulmonic valve, right ventricle from pulmonary trunk. Now, we're going to put all this up here on the board, okay, so you can see it written out in the big picture.
And it's left ventricle too right here, right?
Right ventricle.
Yes.
Oh, sorry. Left ventricle to the aorta. Got it.
Now, why would I use red and blue?
Oxygenated and unoxygenated.
Okay, oxygenated versus deoxygenated, right? What does oxygenated mean versus deoxygenated?
Coming from the lung.
It's
Coming
word.
from to the
Oxygen
heart.
saturation. Okay, think that. Because, and I wouldn't expect you guys to know this yet because we haven't talked about it, but when we get to the respiratory unit, even though we call it deoxygenated blood, just at rest, like we are now, when that deoxygenated blood gets back to the heart, it's still roughly 75% saturated with oxygen. The hemoglobin is still 75% saturated. So it's deoxygenated, maybe not the best term to use, but that's what we use. Okay, so blue is what? Deoxygenated? Oxygenated. Now, your anatomy. How many vessels do we have? How many types of vessels do we have? Veins, arteries, capillaries. Okay? It wasn't a deep question. Okay? Which of those three, in general, carries blood away from the heart? Arteries.
Away.
Okay? And veins carry blood to the heart. Okay, and capillary beds, typically where gas exchange is going to take place. Now, if arteries carry blood away from the heart and veins carry blood to the heart, can we say with 100% certainty that all arteries carry oxygenated blood only?
No.
Why?
Because how about the artery that goes to the heart?
There's one that carries.
Well,
What was that? The pulmonary arteries. Okay? Where, and like you're going to see in this sequence, the pulmonary arteries, yeah, they're carrying blood away from the heart. I switched.
this makes sense.
But they're carrying deoxygenated blood. The pulmonary veins, yes, they're carrying blood to the heart, but they are carrying oxygenated blood. Okay? So that's the only example in the body where that principle is different. Okay? But in general, all arteries carry oxygenated blood with those exceptions. So, what we're going to do is I'm going to use blue, okay, in the sequence here to signify wherever there is deoxygenated blood. And then I will use red to signify oxygenated blood. Now, think of these two things. Is one of them going to have oxygenated blood and the other deoxygenated, or is there going to be a mix in the two? Who votes for one has one and the other has the other?
I think,
Who votes for one has total oxygenated and the other has total deoxygenated? Am I the only one?
I say one's gonna have its own.
Okay,
the
or
other
who
one's
votes for a
gonna-
mix? Who's embarrassed to raise their hand because they don't know? At least you're honest. That's okay. That's why we're gonna do this. So that way, by the time you're done, by the time you walk out of here, you're gonna be experts. All right, so I'm gonna start the sequence with the pulmonary circuit, okay? And I'm gonna start with the driving force for the pulmonary circuit, which is what?
The right ventricle.
The right ventricle. Now, why am I using blue?
Because it's
Deoxygenated. Okay, this is the blood that has come back from general circulation. It has unloaded oxygen and nutrients, picked up CO2 and metabolic waste products, and has now made its way back to the heart so that it can get to the lungs, unload the CO2, pick up O2. So, from the right ventricle, okay, it's going to go somewhere, right? But what is it going to go through?
the tricuspid valve. Oh, the pulmonic valve.
From the right ventricle, the pulmonic valve,
To the pulmonary trunk.
into the pulmonary trunk. From the pulmonary trunk,
Pulmonary artery.
we know that that splits into the right and left pulmonary arteries, and they go where?
Left lung, right lung.
Lungs. Okay. Now, what do I need to do?
Switch your pen.
Yeah, switcheroo. Yeah, oxygenated blood.
I switch colors. Why? Because now the blood has been oxygenated. So, from the lungs, it's going to make its way back to the left side of the heart. But before it enters the heart, which vessels is it going to have to go through?
Capillaries.
Pulmonary veins,
Pulmonary vein.
but the right.
My marker's starting to die. The right and left pulmonary veins. From there,
To the left atrium.
left atrium,
Get your blood.
through what?
Bicuspid.
And you could insert any of those names in there. Okay, so from the bicuspid valve into what?
Left ventricle.
Okay. Left ventricle. Through what?
Aortic valve.
The aortic valve. Into what vessel?
Aorta. Into the systemic circulation.
Out to systemic circulation.
And we start all over.
Okay. Now what do I need to do?
Change pen.
Change colors. So it goes out, does its job, and it's making its way back to the right side of the heart, But before it enters the heart, okay, it's going to enter, obviously, one of the 4 chambers through 3 different vessels. So what are they? The two vena cava, and I can never remember how to spell the plural. I think it's
V-E-N-A-E-C-A-V-A-E.
the superior and inferior vena cava, and there's one more. And this one is the one that everybody forgets until I remind them. The heart, remember, the heart obviously circulates blood to the entire body, right? But what's going to supply the heart? The coronary circulation. So the coronary arteries and veins. Okay? So the third guy on our list here is part of that network, part of the coronary, one of the coronary veins. So the third vessel that we put here is the vessel that basically drains the heart itself and sends that blood back into the next chamber. Does anybody remember what that is? The coronary sinus. Remember, with the coronary circulation, the coronary arteries will supply the myocardium, right? The heart muscle itself. Then that blood is drained and makes its way back to this guy. Okay? So after that blood gets to the myocardium, heart contracts, that blood now will make its way back to this. Into which chamber?
Right.
Right atrium. From the right atrium, it goes through what? Into through the tricuspid valve. Okay, or here, let's do this. Okay, so now let's look at this list, see if we're complete. Do we have all of our valves? What do we have over here? Tricuspid, bicuspid? Yeah, we're good. Our 2 semilunar valves, so we're all right there. Do we have our key vessels up there? Pulmonary trunk, aorta. Are they up there?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. How many chambers do we have up there?
1, 2, chambers.
We have our 4, right? Okay. Actually, I was wrong with the vessels. How many key vessels should we have up there?
3, 5.
Aorta, pulmonary trunk.
Your ventricles and your atrium. Oh no.
Don't forget those 3.
5 what? 5
5 key vessels,
key vessels.
4 key valves, 4 chambers. Okay, now, let's apply this to some real life examples. Okay, this actually happened to me once. I think I was doing a night shift. I always did the day shift, but I was doing a night shift in the ER once, and our admitter comes back to us in the back and says, "Hey, there's a guy out in the lobby says he's been stabbed." So we're like, what? That doesn't happen at Selma. So we went out there, and sure enough, there's this dude laying on the floor, stabbed in the back. Like, oh, okay, let's get this guy in and help him out. Okay? Well, I mean, you can use a personal example. Okay? It hits closer to home for me. Several years ago, I was living down in Southern California. I would always turn my phone off at night because I didn't like people bothering me. I liked my sleep. So I get up in the morning, turn my phone on. There's like 8 messages. Like, that can't be good. So, first one. I think it was my uncle, one of my uncles. And then there was my dad, and then there was one of my aunts. And Joe, give us a call. Your brother's been stabbed. You got to get back. You got to come home. Okay, that's a little shocking. So I go out to my car, find out it's been towed. So I had parked somewhere where it wasn't signed properly, and they towed my car. So I got to make my way to get my car. So anyway, I pick my car up, go home, find out my brother had been stabbed 7 times. Like, how did this happen? Okay, so don't do this. Okay, don't do this. My brother and his friends are up at Bass Lake, having a little bit too much drinky, and they're making their way back to their cabin. They're driving along, and this one gentleman happens to be walking across the road, and they have to swerve to miss him. Now, what should they have done? They should have just kept on going. Okay, but they didn't. Okay, my brother's a big dude; he's bigger than me. So they turn around and go back, and they pull up to the guy, and my brother's in the passenger side of this truck, and he rolls down his window and starts probably impolitely telling the guy what they think of him. So the guy rushes over to the truck, starts leaning into the window, starts trying to beat on my brother. Again, my brother's a big guy, football player. So he forces his way out, starts beating the crap out of the guy. My brother's buddy, the driver, jumps out. They're just wailing away on the guy. They get back in the truck and take off. So my brother gets back in the truck. Driver's girlfriend, cab light comes on, says, "Oh my God, Josh, you're bleeding." And my brother's like, "I do remember feeling kind of wet, you know." And he goes, "I lifted up my shirt and blood squirted out." And so apparently, okay, the combination of the alcohol and adrenaline allowed my brother not to feel the knife that was repeatedly stabbing him. 7 times. 7 times. Slash across the back of the neck.
A lot of alcohol.
The worst one was a deep one in the abdomen, which thankfully didn't hit anything vital. But the point being, let's say you are dumb like my brother was, okay? And you suffer a traumatic injury, knife wound, gunshot, say a severed limb or appendages. I'll tell you a good story about that in a second. What's going to happen? What are you doing? What happened to my brother? You bleed out, right?
Hydraulic decompression.
Blood from here goes out. Now, if that blood doesn't make its way back to ultimately follow the sequence, where am I at? Okay. If the blood that was lost here, okay, if you follow the sequence on around, how much blood relative to normal is going to be here? A lot less. So if the left ventricle, like we know now, is the driving force behind systemic circulation and is pumping blood out to the body, and we've lost a lot of blood because of a traumatic injury, and not as much blood makes its way back to the left ventricle. Now, what happens to the supply that the body needs? Tanks. Now, and like we're going to find out, if blood volume goes down because of blood loss, one of the ways that the heart will react to compensate at that point in time is to beat faster and harder, because not as much blood is there. So if the heart has to keep up with the demands of the body, it's going to pump faster and harder until they can stop the bleeding. Okay? And then ultimately replace it with fluid, and the body will replace its own blood cells. Okay? Let's say, where am I? Okay. Bicuspid valve, mitral valve. Now, in terms of jobs, okay, we know that the valves, okay, they ensure that blood goes one way. They ensure a unidirectional flow of blood. But, again, what they also do is they help prevent backflow. Blood, is only supposed to go one way. It's not supposed to go two ways. Okay? I hate driving in places where there's a lot of one-way streets. Hate it.
Oh my God.
Took my wife to San Francisco
I was just gonna say.
a couple years ago to see Wicked for her birthday, and I hated driving in downtown San Francisco. I still do. Okay? I love the Bay Area, but I hate driving in downtown San Francisco because of all the stupid one-way streets. Okay? Valves help ensure one-way flow of blood. Okay? And again, they help prevent the backflow of blood going backwards. But is the human body perfect?
No.
No. Okay? Sometimes things don't work the way they should. So, let's say, for example, our buddy here, Mr. Bicuspid valve, doesn't seal tightly. What happens to the blood volume in the left ventricle?
Fills up.
Is it the same?
No,
Does it go up
It
or
goes
does it go
up.
down?
It goes up. Well,
Think about it
it
logically.
should fill up, right? Because it can't go out.
This guy
It's
seals. Okay? Prevents blood from moving here backward.
go down.
If it doesn't seal properly, blood will go backwards, which tells us what about the volume? It goes down. So if the blood in the left ventricle, if the volume goes down, what happens?
You're gonna take
Okay. The metabolic demands of the body cannot be met the way they're supposed to be met. So you can apply those examples anywhere up here. Okay. What if, and this happened to a relative of mine once. Okay. Went out to get his newspaper. He was older. One of my great uncles had a pretty massive heart attack, and what happened to him was part of his aorta ruptured not too far outside of the heart. So he was dead before the paramedics even got to him. So you can apply that example there. If this guy ruptures, blood isn't getting out here. Okay? So again, you can think of any number of examples that affect this sequence. And if the person is healthy, everything's working normally, this sequence is fine. Everything proceeds normally. But like we said, things aren't perfect. People get sick. People get injured. Bad things happen every day. And when that happens, this chain is broken somewhere. Now it's the job of medical professionals to fix it.
Is, what you were talking about with the bicuspid valve not being tightly closed, is that also what some people call a leaky heart? Like having a leaky?
I'm not quite sure. I think the one thing I'm thinking of is called mitral valve prolapse, where it kind of because when the AV valves when they shut, like if you guys remember your anatomy, and if you look at the diagram that I have in that handout for you, there's little cords attached to them, right? The chordae tendineae that are then attached to the papillary muscles. So when those valves shut, and like we're going to talk about Thursday, okay, valves open and close entirely based on pressure differences. So whenever those valves close, okay, they slam shut, those papillary muscles contract, pull on those cords, and prevent the AV valves from prolapsing or kind of going back up into the atria. Now, if that's what they refer to as a leaky heart, I'm not quite sure. I'd have to check on that. Okay. And again, we can think of any number of examples. You know, females. You know, when they lose a lot of blood during childbirth. Okay, a very serious thing. If they lose a lot of blood, what happens to the volume that makes its way back here? It goes down, just like if it was a blood loss from a gunshot. Okay. So again, the point being, when everything's working normally, this sequence, this chain is fine. But on occasion, for one reason or another, a link can get broken and something goes wrong in this sequence. Okay, so I like to start off with this because on Thursday what we're going to talk about is what's called the cardiac cycle. Okay, and we're not really going to talk much about electrocardiography with EKG tracings and things like that. I might point out what 3 of the typical parts of a tracing mean, but I don't think it's in the scope of this class to really get in depth into that. But I'll briefly mention it, and we'll focus on the cardiac cycle, which is the sequence of events, the entire sequence of events that happen during one single heartbeat. There's a lot. Okay? Any questions on this? Like I said, cardiac cycle on Thursday. Then when we come back from spring break, it will be the Tuesday we get back. We're going to talk about what's called cardiac output, which is a mathematical equation essentially that looks like this. What is HR?
Heart rate.
Yes, not human resources. So it's HR. Anybody know what SV means? Stroke volume. Stroke volume. Stroke volume refers to the amount of blood that the ventricles pump out when they contract. Okay, per ventricular contraction. So CO is cardiac output. This is telling us cardiac output refers to the amount of blood that the ventricles pump out per heartbeat, okay, or per minute. Okay. So we've got a volume term and a time term. And like we're going to come to find out, okay, this is a very important equation here, because you guys can imagine that there are, and we've mentioned a few here, there are things that are going to affect how much blood the ventricles pump out. Might be an injury, okay? Or there are things that make the heart beat faster or even slower, okay? Give me some examples. Okay? What are some things that make the heart beat faster?
Cocaine.
Meth? Sex. Cocaine? Sex? Nobody?
Sports.
I'm the only one that ever brings that up. Everybody's afraid to say it. I'm not. Anxiety, exercise, taking a test,
Caffeine.
taking a test, caffeine. What's that? Fear. Okay. So emotional responses can change this. Okay. Narcotics can change this. What about lowering heart rate?
Alcohol.
Resting. Can exercise lower heart rate?
Yeah.
In the long term, yes.
Uh-huh.
But in the immediate, goes up.
Alcohol?
Alcohol. Alcohol,
Definitely.
okay, will drop it in the immediate, but has a tendency to possibly increase it over time. Okay. Why would alcohol lower heart rate?
Right.
It's a CNS depressant. And what happens to your body, let's say urologically,
Muscle action?
whenever you drink a lot?
You gotta pee
You pee.
a lot.
Alcohol is a diuretic, and we'll find out in Unit 5.
Caffeine.
When you lose a lot of fluid, okay, blood volume goes down. So alcohol is kind of a double whammy here. Slows heart rate down, but it can also lower this, as can other things. Okay? So that's why we spend a whole day talking about this alone. We'll talk about the factors that affect stroke volume. We'll talk about the factors that affect heart rate, because these are the things that you guys, seriously, are going to see all the time, everywhere. Okay? So any questions?
Two questions. One, CO, what's that for again?
Cardiac output.
And then for the, vital key vessels and periods of vena cava, coronary sinus, and all the other two.
Is it aortic, the pulmonary trunk?
Aorta, pulmonary trunk, and then those three.
Yeah.
You're welcome. Any others?
Stethoscopes and BF.
Yeah,
BP
hopefully you
cuffs.
got my, because the stethoscopes and cuffs that we have in the lab are crap. I'll just be honest with you, they're crap. Now, the only thing that I'm not happy about is that I got here early this morning to go make copies, and I walk into the administration building, and there's a nice big sign on the copier that says service has been requested. Crap. So I'm not actually going to have lab forms for you guys today. I'll have to make the copies tomorrow in Kalinga and bring them on Thursday. So I'll write everything up on the board that you need for the day. But I'm just curious, how many of you do not know how to take a blood pressure measurement the old-fashioned way? You've never taken it with a cup and
I just learned 2 days
big
ago.
momanometer,
It's actually pretty
a
easy.
manual blood pressure reading. Okay. Believe it or not, kind of important that you know how to do that. Okay? Because what are you going to do, let's say if you're in a hospital setting and your power goes out and your backup generator goes out.
That happens in the
It's
ER
a
all the time.
battery
The nurses
pump one.
can't even take a blood pressure
Yeah, see,
when
and
we're
that's
working.
pretty ridiculous.
The battery pump one. My dad has one that goes on the wrist.
So, you've got to know how to do it the old-fashioned way.
Go.
We got
Okay,
skills
so
right
lab
there.
this week, you're going to learn how to take a blood pressure measurement. Second thing you're going to learn how to do is you're going to learn how to palpate pulses. You know what does anybody know what palpate means?
Feel.
Touch. Okay? You're going to palpate pulses on 5 different sites. Okay? And give them grades.
You
Okay?
do it on the
With
foot.
EMS, we
I
use
get
a
so mad
grading
at my
system. 0 to 4.
I used to lie to my feet.
Okay? 0 is kind of bad. Okay? 4 is kind of bad. Okay? You don't want 0s, you don't want 4s. Especially don't want 0s. Okay? And then the third activity is heart sounds. Okay? I am not going to teach you how to listen for murmurs and other abnormalities. This lab is strictly meant to help you learn stethoscope placement. Where to place your stethoscope to listen for sounds coming from how many valves?
4.
4. Because like you're going to find out, you're not placing the stethoscope directly over the valves. Because sound doesn't work that way. So this is where physics and biology come together. Okay? So you're gonna practice learning where to place your stethoscope on a person's chest to listen for heart sounds, and you're gonna practice calculating heart rate by doing that. And you might imagine we'll talk about this in lab. Let me ask you, I'll just ask you this now, so I don't have to do it later. Do you think that the sounds coming from all 4 valves are going to be equally loud?
No.
Why?
It's different pumps. Pressures.
Pressure. Okay? Because you've got, obviously, 4 chambers, right? The atria do contract. When they contract, they send blood into the ventricles. Okay? Which of the 4 chambers is going to contract with the largest amount of force?
The aorta or the
The
left
left
atrium?
ventricle. What valve does it send blood through?
The aortic valve?
The aortic valve. So logically, the sounds coming from that valve should be the loudest, because that valve has blood going through it with the largest amount of force. So when it slams shut, it should be the loudest. Okay? So you'll be able to test whether or not that is entirely accurate.
Cool beans.
Any other questions? Okay, honestly, we call this the big, or I call it the big 3. I don't really care what anybody else calls it. I call it the big 3 because these next 3 units, guys, really are important. Everything we do is important. Okay? I'm not going to blow sunshine up your bums to just, kill time. Okay? These 3 units are very, very important. And historically, and I say this to inspire a little bit of fear in you, or instill a little bit of fear in you, I should say. Historically, Unit 4 has the lowest test scores, historically speaking. Why? I honestly don't know. I really don't. Maybe so. Maybe so.
Got a good point.
So,
I want Arizona.
I encourage you guys to have a good time next week. But don't forget this stuff. Okay? This unit